What is going on, everybody? We are here 1 week before the NFL draft with our next positional rankings video here with the linebackers here today. This is going to be a fun one, man. We don't get good linebacker classes like this often. I think back to the year where we had Leo Chenal and Devin Lloyd, and for some reason Brian Gutekunst spent a first-round pick on Quay Walker that year, but that was a good linebacker class. There's a couple other years, but this one's up there with the better linebacker classes that I've watched since I started doing this back in 2017, so we got a lot of fun players to talk about here today. It's a good year to need a linebacker. As we get started, if you could please do me a favor, hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and as we're a week away from the draft here, I want you guys to set a reminder on your phone, if you need it, to come back to the channel the night of the draft. I will be live here with all of my live reactions and analysis as we've done it in the past. Teddy will be there. My wife will be updating the graphics for you with the grades, with the selections, who's on the clock. I'll have highlights for you. It's a great show. Very, very much looking forward to it. I've started to get that giddy kid before Christmas feeling. I'm ready, man. I'm excited, though we still have a lot of work to do here, breaking down these positions as we get up to the draft. So let's go ahead and get into it with this linebacker class, doing a top 10. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up with my number 10 linebacker in this draft. And I'll be honest, the first couple guys on this list are still kind of late day 2, early day 3, call them flyers, maybe starters. Even if this is a really good linebacker class relative to most years, it's still a position group that can be really hard to find, entry-level, immediate talent. It's a lot of day 3 developmental picks usually. But my number 10 linebacker here has the same grade as my number 9 guy. It is Bryce Betcher out of Oregon. And to put this in perspective, Betcher would have been as LB6 last year, so it's a good reflection on where last year's class was at. But I don't need to spend too much time on Bryce Betcher. I feel like he's kind of a what you see is what you get type of linebacker prospect. He's probably the worst athlete on this list. He managed to run a 4.69, and it was good for him to clear the 4.7s with that. But when you talk about range and coverage, sideline to sideline speed, quickness to dodge blocks and stuff, he's kind of right on the fringe of what is adequate and acceptable for someone that can be out there consistently on an NFL field. I think he has just enough athleticism, but that means he must dominate with physicality and with his mind, with his discipline and instincts. And I think he's got enough of those things. I think he sees the run really well. He's got a good trigger. He doesn't blow his gaps. He's got all of the mental side of things you look for at this position in terms of getting guys lined up pre-snap and, play recognition. Everything checks, every box is checked in that department. And that shows up in his zone coverage as well. Again, he isn't going to have a lot of range in zone coverage. There's a reason they kind of had Dylan Thieneman behind them playing a lot of cover 2 in that mid-read, taking up so much range in the middle of that Oregon defense, because some of their linebackers here, they just kind of had him hanging out in a little hook zone and take away what's in that area. And Bryce Betcher did show that he can do that in those limited zone coverages, which is good to see. He can read and react to the quarterback's eyes and keep his eyes looking at what's coming into his area and that kind of stuff. So he's not useless in coverage. He can do what he can with his mind. He's very I think of TJ Edwards in that sense, has had pretty decent ball production in his NFL career, even though he went undrafted because he was just, an inadequate athlete. There's shades of that, I guess, with Bryce Betcher, strictly from a coverage perspective. But yeah, he's just a solid player. If you have no LB2 and you struck out in free agency and you're a team that's we could use a guy that could step in, that knows what he's doing, that's just kind of solid across the board, and then maybe long-term he's a really nice backup for us, I think that's Bryce Betcher. At the end of the 3rd, early 4th round is right around where I would value that type of player. But then let's get to my number 9 slash 9A linebacker. So the same grade here, late 3rd, early 4th in Jimmy Rolder. But we arrive at that grade with this player for different reasons. And his upside is higher than Betcher, in my opinion. And I actually think his impact on the game, his playmaking ability is higher than Betcher, making him just an overall better player. But the problem with Jimmy Rolder here is major durability concerns. He was a highly recruited guy going to Michigan and just took a long time to really get on the field. It was really his third year where he started to get a decent amount of playing time. But apparently just a lot of little injuries here and there just kind of held him back from competing for those starting jobs throughout the years. He wins the starting job in his senior year, and even in that senior year, he missed about 3 games. So this is a player that does kind of get dinged for the medical stuff, and it's just a risk, right? Like a guy that got hurt in college, there's a chance he gets hurt in the NFL. But if you talk about what he is on the field, this was a player I watched late in the process amidst a bunch of true day 3 graded linebackers. When you watch these guys lumped together, the beauty of it is it really helps you see when a guy stands out as just a better player than that other crop of like true day 3 guys. And Jimmy Rolder's tape did pop to me really in both phases, man. He's a 6'2", 238-pound listed weight, which is really good size. He does have shorter arms there, 30.5 inches, but he's not small. He has the requisite play strength behind him to hang around the box, to arrive with force as a tackler, and you love to see that. But at that listed size, I thought he moves closer to what you expect from someone that's about 10 pounds lighter. He's not fast necessarily, and he didn't run a 40. I think if he did, it would be in the 4.6s, if not sniffing like 4.70. But he does have really like fluid hips, fast feet, the agility, change of direction, and first step acceleration for him are fantastic, and certainly enough to compensate for his speed stalling out a little bit. Do you wish he was faster? Yeah, absolutely. Like that's going to play into him not being a super highly rated player here. But in terms of bouncing around blocks or sticking with guys in coverage in short areas, he's got stuff to like from his athletic profile. And I think mentally speaking, like this guy's got instincts. He's got a playmaker's mentality. He'll shoot into the backfield, make impressive, splash TFLs. I think in coverage, he showed some good ability to kind of bait the QB and really nice stuff in his zone drops. I think he has that thing you really want to see when you watch these linebackers in their zone drops, where their head, their neck is bouncing around. They're active and understand how teams are trying to attack them. They are proactive to take throwing windows away. Too many college linebackers just drop into their spot, stare at the QB, and then react once something happens. He goes and finds work in scramble drill. Like he would consistently go take away potential targets for QBs when they get outside the pocket and the QB's on the run. So I think he understands what he's doing in coverage. And even if you don't have the long speed, that's just going to hurt your margin for error and your range as a coverage defender, but he can still absolutely play in coverage, which when you read Jimmy Rolder's scouting reports, that's usually the big knock, is like, you don't want this guy in coverage. And I kind of disagree. Like he has his limitations for sure, but I think he's at least functional unless you run a ton of cover 2 and need him to be your rangy mid-read defender. He's also a really good blitzer too. He really brings the hammer when he arrives. He's got a ton of stopping power as a tackler as well, but that shows up when he takes on these blockers, not just running backs. Like I saw him a couple times bash into offensive linemen and convert speed to power as a blitzer. So that adds some value on passing downs for teams that are willing to blitz and get him after the quarterback. And from a run defense perspective, while he only started a year, you could tell he was like in the film room and grooming his mind for this position at Michigan there. He plays like a green dot defender, gets guys lined up, understands diagnostics and that kind of stuff. I think sometimes he can be a little bit over aggressive and lose some gap contain, and I think you want to find the perfect balance as he gets more reps, gets more playing time, and develops the diagnostics and the discipline aspect of the position. And he's got enough size to take on blocks as well. The shorter arms will show up. Like he's He's a little bit dancy around blocks, I would say, like a lot of athlete types are at the linebacker position. So there's some times where he can get swallowed up against the run, despite the fact that he's 238 pounds, because he can get caught up on blocks at times. But he is good at using that agility to dance around blocks, and when he is aggressive, that incredible first step that he has, he can just outshoot blocks entirely and avoid linemen getting their hands on him. So there's just a lot of stuff to like with him. There's things to be critical of with the durability and the long speed and the lack of playing time, but he pretty easily made his way inside the top 10 here. I could see him being a starter in the league if he stays healthy. I saw a lot of Drue Tranquill when I watched him play. Pretty much everything I described applies to Drue Tranquill, where he's not necessarily the fastest guy, but he is a good, fluid, explosive athlete when you watch him play. And Drue Tranquill at like 30 years old just keeps getting better and better, man. So I like that as a pro comp, and I absolutely would take a flyer on Jimmy Rolder kind of in the, inside the top 100 at the end of the third or early fourth round. Before I go to our next player, I want to thank the sponsor for today's video, SeatGeek. With the weather getting better up here in Minnesota, it's hard not to think about going to baseball games, outdoor concerts, that kind of stuff. I'm sure it's not just Minnesota. Things are getting nice around the world right now. And SeatGeek has got you covered, man. Whether that is the MLB, where SeatGeek is the official partner of the MLB, but concerts, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, you name it, SeatGeek has the best app, the best user interface. It's easy to use. They color code every single seat. So as long as you know that green means good and red means bad, just look for those green dots. You will find the best deal, not just on the app, but market competitive prices as well. You'll get the tickets conveniently right there in the SeatGeek app. Again, very easy platform to use. So a huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's linebacker rankings. And if you use code TFG10 when you check out, you will save up to $20 on your first purchase on top of everything we've already talked about there. So shout out to SeatGeek. It's TFG10 at checkout. And let's get to our next linebacker, and I have here at LB8, Keyshawn Elliott out of Arizona State. Another guy that does have some physical limitations, I would say, between Betcher, Rolder, and Elliott. They all kind of have different holes to poke in their athletic profile. In terms of Keyshawn Elliott, he is particularly stiff in terms of when he turns and he opens up. The explosiveness as well. The just lateral movement skills are noticeably poor with him. But what he has that maybe Betcher and Rolder don't have is when he gets on a single track and he's running down a QB or a running back or a screenplay towards the sideline, he is more of a long striding athlete, so he can actually really cover ground and has some pretty good speed, and that was reflected when he ran a 4.58. But again, as a longer striding athlete, having that reactive athleticism, the bouncy movement skills in space, you're not going to get that with Elliott, and it does hurt his game at times, but it is nice to know that he's got some long speed. And the other thing with him is he's listed at 231 pounds. I actually think if you told me that him and Rolder's weight were flipped, I would believe you, because Keyshawn Elliott plays closer to a 240-pound linebacker in the way that he smashes blockers and can hit than maybe Jimmy Rolder. Not that Rolder is weak by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it really shows with Elliott that he's strong. He's rocked up. He just, for one reason or another, weighs in at 231 pounds. So he's more of a north and south, physical, like run defense oriented player. I don't think he's useless in coverage. He, like a Jimmy Rolder, has a really nice baseline of zone eyes. He is active in zone and will drift in front of throwing windows and take stuff away in zone in the way that you like to see. But he, with that stiffness, like, dude, he gets crossed up in coverage all the time, running backs, running angle routes out of the backfield, trying to cover tight ends. He's going to have a bad time trying to do that against NFL players, especially. So he's even more limited in terms of what you can ask him to do in coverage. Though you do see with him as a blitzer, he can really get downhill and light up running backs with some overwhelming force as a blitzer at times as well. So, likewise with some of these other guys, it's like there's aspects where they can be practical in coverage. They just aren't going to be particularly impactful in that phase, and certainly are going to be limited in the sense of keep them within that kind of 5-ish yard area. QB spies, blitzing, shallow hook zones, like it's kind of what you're going to get, especially from a Keyshawn Elliott. But from a run defense standpoint, this is how Elliott found himself above our last two linebackers. He's a really good linebacker prospect. His ability to break down the run, to anticipate what's coming, to play with run discipline where he can be aggressive when he needs to be to fill holes and make run stops at the line, but he's not going to overshoot gaps or blow his run lane. Really good from that side of things. He absolutely, like I said, can take on blocks. He's got really nice play strength, and he has enough to thump. Tight ends, if they meet him, he disposes of them very quickly, and he's got enough to kind of stack, peek, and shed against linemen that are meeting him in the hole as well. I wish he was a better tackler, to be honest. He's physical and arrives with force, and he's not a horrible tackler, but the stiff feet, the lack of change of direction, like I said, he can get crossed up in coverage. He can get crossed up if there's really any space as a tackler. So he will end up, in compromising positions when he's trying to tackle better athletes. So there's imperfections to his game, but he understands the position, and he's a nice player. I see a lot of Omar Spates to his game, who's been a very solid LB2 for the Rams, who's a very run defense oriented player who is used in a very similar way as a coverage player where sometimes they'll just take him off the field on third downs. But again, shallow hook zones, QB spies, blitzing him. That's how you can kind of shelter a player like this on passing downs and leverage their ability as a run defender on early downs. So if you're comfortable with that profile and a little bit more of a one-sided type of linebacker, Keyshawn Elliott can be your guy. And I think third round for him is very reasonable for what his tape was and who he is as a player. And then as we go to my number 7 linebacker here, Josiah Trotter out of Missouri. Very similar style, I think, in many ways, though. You're just kind of turning the knobs up with an even bigger player and a higher upside run defender than Keyshawn Elliott. There's some differences. We'll break it down. I do want to note that I do actually have a 3-way tie for my number 5 linebacker, 3 different players that came in with the same grade, which is a late second, early third round grade on these upcoming 3 players. And as you'll see as we go here, all 3 of those guys, extremely different styles. Like, really could not find 3 different types of linebackers. So it's going to come down to like what style you want with these upcoming 3 players specifically. But Josiah Trotter, it doesn't take long to see what type of linebacker this guy is. He's big, he's 6'2", almost 240 pounds. Honestly, with room to add to that frame, he's still very young. But, very good arm length, 32.5 inches. And he is a north and south battering ram against the run. I think his physicality and especially his ability to take on blocks is some of the best in this draft. He just doesn't get caught up on blocks too often, which is not something you say a lot about college linebacker prospects. I think that's probably his biggest selling point. And again, young players, still room to get even better in that department. But not only does he have many times that proper like stack, peak, shed ability and the ability to do that against climbing linemen as well. But I'll break down his athleticism. He's not the best athlete, but he does have light feet, and that allows him to kind of dance and be savvy around blocks at times as well. And he's instinctive to know when it's appropriate to do that as well. A lot of like linebackers with quick feet that can dance around blocks, they do it all the time, and they take themselves out of the run game. Trotter will do it when he sees an opportunity to out-athlete a block, and the quick feet can come in handy there, but he doesn't depend on it. He can absolutely take you head-on in the run game as well. And I think just in all the other aspects of the run game, there's a lot to like. Like, I think he's a really good tackler, maybe not a perfect tackler, but the way he's able to see things quickly, play without hesitation, get downhill, the diagnostics are really good. He can be over aggressive at times, so you want to see the proper balance. That's how you get, if you're looking at the screen there, a B grade for the diagnostics. He knows what he's looking for. He sees things quickly and goes without hesitation. But the discipline grade is a D+. He will outrun gaps. He will sometimes take himself out of the run by shooting things a little bit too quickly. And it shows up against play action as well. He will absolutely take the cheese on play action. So, some coaches are more comfortable with that mentality than others. And some coaches will really try to get him to find that right balance in a young player there, which I think both are possible outcomes for him. One, to just be a headhunter. Number two, to really develop into a nice, well-rounded run defender. Now, I mentioned I would circle back to his overall athletic profile. We mentioned the quick feet. That's absolutely there for a guy his size. But he's not that fast. That's going to be the big knock on him. Even compared to Keyshawn Elliott, who's more of a run defense oriented player. We didn't get a 40 time from Josiah Trotter. I would be pretty surprised if he ran a 4.58 like Keyshawn Elliott was able to do. I don't think he's horribly slow, but that's how I get to my Alex Singleton comp, who's been a really nice linebacker in the NFL for about 10 years, despite being a guy whose long speed can be a limiting factor at times. If he's trying to track down a play to the sideline, whether it's a QB scramble or a fast running back bounces it out to the outside, he can't, his speed will stall out and his angle will end up breaking and he can end up not being the one that ends up making that tackle, right? So there's some limits with his long speed, but I think especially where you would ding him would be the change of direction and how it impacts his coverage ability. His hips are stiff as hell, and when he's dropping into zone or if he's trying to turn and run in man coverage, there's a whole extra hitch there. It is a laboring movement for him to turn and run. You want to keep him on one track, playing physical, north and south in a box. And some systems are better at leveraging that as a strength. Some systems that can get exposed a little bit if you end up asking these guys to play in space a lot more. So you got to do some internal assessment of what kind of defense are we and what are we asking of our linebackers. I will say, in pass defense, Trotter is an excellent blitzer. He can overwhelm backs with his size and his power, absolutely, but he was really impressive, again, leveraging sneaky quick feet with a really effective swim move that he didn't just use to destroy running backs in protection. He actually can break out that swim move as, when linemen are stepping in to meet him. He has the Euro step swim move that you like to see from some pass rushers. So he's got an added element as a blitzer to give you a little bit of something on third downs. But there really just is no mistake about who Josiah Trotter is. By the way, the son of Jeremiah Trotter, so he's got the bloodlines, grew up with the game. There are definitely moments from a young player where it shows he's got the requisite mind for the position as well. He's not just this, see ball, hit ball, go smash, Hulk type. So there's a good bit to like with him. Still young and room to grow in different pockets of his game for sure. But I liked him. Just as I like these next two players, again, players I'm comfortable within the second round. Mid to late second, early third even. All of it, I'm cool. If they come off the board, I could see it. But my number 6/5B linebacker is Anthony Hill out of Texas. And this is where tape watching becomes so fun because nearly identical physical measurements here. 6'2", 238 pounds, 32.5-inch arms. I hardly had to tweak the template as I updated the graphic from one player to the next there. However, these two guys could not be any different as football players. Anthony Hill is a really fast, explosive player at his size who Texas just let him be an athlete on the field. He's much more of an example of what I complain about a lot with young linebackers, where a lot of these college offenses just don't ask these guys to do like NFL linebacker things all the time. Some teams do, and I think someone like Trotter was asked to do like NFL linebacker things. Anthony Hillett was just like, okay, you're lining up as a weak side linebacker, sometimes a slot corner, and we want you to find the ball and run to the ball. Like, boiling down his assignment down to the bare basics. And he was pretty good at doing that, right? The long speed, the ability to track down the ball, it shows when he's out there in open space. You can tell there's a reason that Texas was comfortable asking him to do that. And I do think in that role, when you got into the drop back passing game, his role would convert into more complex zone coverage assignments, and his experience in doing that allowed him to, I think, give you a nice baseline of zone IQ. I don't want to describe Anthony Hill as some dummy. It's just the role that he played leaves a lot of fog of war once you talk about him as an inside linebacker at the next level. And we'll get to that. But like, I see a guy that understands what's going on in coverage, and he takes stuff away. He has a good baseline of like route recognition, and the coverage stuff was very workable for him, where if he's out there in a zone drop day one in the NFL, I don't think he's going to get abused out there. And he's pretty good man-to-man as well because he's such a good athlete. So of all the guys we've talked about so far, if you're looking for someone with more coverage ability and coverage range and an expansive role where he can actually man up tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, he can get out to the sideline and play a curl flat zone. You can put him as a mid-read cover 2 zone defender and have him run up and down the pole. Like, he has a lot more coverage versatility and I think in turn more overall upside than a lot of the guys we've talked about. Now, where he's lacking is in a department that everyone we've talked about to this point has checked a lot of boxes at, and that is when you put him between the tackles, how is he as an actual NFL linebacker? Because he spent so much time as an outside backer, like a, outside the tackles, weak side, strong side linebacker. Not always like a true slot corner necessarily, but certainly outside of the tackle box, where he's allowed to just run plays down, use his athleticism. But when they put him inside the tackles, a lot of times it was third downs, true passing down situations where he's either blitzing from the inside or dropping into a zone assignment. And in the rare times where you got to see him line up between the tackles against the run on early downs, his role in that spot was an attacking role. It was, whether it was a designed blitz or what he was coached to do, this is your gap. You got the B gap when the ball is snapped. If you think it's a run or if it's just a blitz, you're going anyway. You're getting up the B gap and go make a play. They just did not ask him to read and react to the run hardly, like, at all, ever. And it sounds crazy to say that, but it's true. So it's the classic case of what can he do versus what was he asked to do. And I will say, if Anthony Hill gets to the NFL and he actually has these really good run diagnostics and is a much more cerebral linebacker than his role in Texas was able to be showcased, he could be a steal in this draft. But you're going to end up sliding him down the board a little bit because you just don't know if it's in there. I will say as well, his ability to take on blocks is also very much lacking. He is certainly the type that's going to try to out-athlete blocks, and a lot of times he's trying to get to a landmark and he just wants to outrun an offensive lineman, and then he ends up getting caught up. It's like, oh dang, that guy actually reach blocked me, now what? And he just didn't have an answer. He's got the size and the length to get better at that, but he does get caught up on blocks in a way that like Josiah Trotter doesn't. So again, the stylistic difference, especially between him and Trotter, is complete opposite ends of the spectrum for two guys that are built very similarly. Now, I will say this on the way out with Anthony Hill, because I've spent a lot of time talking about his athleticism and his upside, and I will stand by that. It's very much still north and south explosiveness. I don't think he's extremely stiff in terms of change of direction, but it's not amazing. It's not what we're going to talk about with like Sonny Styles or Jacob Rodriguez. But his feet are strangely slow from a foot speed agility standpoint. And that brings me back to the block take-on ability. He just doesn't really have the foot speed and bounciness to work around a lot of blocks. And I think when he gets caught in space, like in more short areas, so to speak, I know that's confusing to say short areas in space, but let's say someone catches a check down underneath him on a little hook from the running back where he just runs up the middle of the field, stops, turns around. Anthony Hill is like 5 yards away, and he's trying to break down in front of him and get himself in proper positioning to make that play. I think his feet do struggle to match like jukes and quick cuts in space as well, and that can hurt his tackling at times. So he's not a flawless athlete, but in terms of like, he ran a 4.52, right? 4.51 actually, 37-inch vertical jump, 125-inch broad jump. That absolutely shows, yet he skipped the 3-cone, he skipped the shuttle, the agility scores. Not a surprise to me to see him skip those things when it shows up on tape. Like, that's not the strength in his athleticism. So he's not a perfect athlete in the sense that we'll talk about with like Sonny Styles. Even like Jacob Rodriguez, who we're going to get to, obviously, is a much more balanced, fluid athlete in every category. But not to say that Anthony Hill is not a great athlete. I actually love my pro comp on Anthony Hill. It's Jermaine Pratt. Some pro comps I feel more confident in others. This thing's like flawless to me. Jermaine Pratt plays north of 240 pounds. I think Anthony Hill could put on a few more pounds. But really good straight line athlete, has been more of a coverage first linebacker at that size, but has always kind of been inconsistent against the run. Pratt, I think, went like top of the third round and has had a very nice career for being that draft slot. I see a damn near identical type of player here in Anthony Hill. But then let's get to Jake Golday, one of the biggest enigmas in the 2026 NFL draft. I mentioned these three guys, Golday, Hill, and Trotter, the same grade, second, third round grade, but all extremely different players. And I got a funny question on Twitter that was like, who's a defensive back that you think could switch to linebacker? And I jokingly quote tweeted it back. I said, Jake Golday, because Jake Golday, for the vast majority of his time at Cincinnati, played a slot cornerback role at 6'4", 240 pounds. Of his 648 snaps, only about 175 of those came between the tackles. So talk about fog of war with an evaluation and just having to kind of throw your hands up and be like, I just don't really know how good he's going to be at the other linebacker stuff. It's tough, man. But you look at the screen there, like diagnostics, discipline, even like how he reacts to play action. I couldn't put grades on it because there's just not enough tape of him being asked to do those things. And likewise, even with Anthony Hill, like even when he was playing between the tackles, a lot of it is you're a blitzing middle linebacker. You're still not being asked to read and react. Now, the difference is like Anthony Hill, I said he didn't play between the tackles. He would be more of a linebacker role. Like he's still around the line of scrimmage. Jake Golday is literally like way the hell out there, like as a legit slot corner position. Like that is especially hard to know how he's like reading things out and reacting to stuff as a linebacker. So he's bizarre, but I mean, he's still my number 5 linebacker for a reason. This dude is fun to watch. He is a rare athlete at his size. There's a reason that they were okay, like sticking him out there. I mean, he's north of 6'4", 240 pounds. and he flies around. In fact, I would say he plays a lot faster than his 4.62 combine 40 time. And I think a big part of that is the acceleration as well, where his 10-yard split is right there with, put this in perspective, Anthony Hill, who is already explosive, had a 1.58 10-yard split. Jake Golday, who ran a 4.62 compared to Anthony Hill, who ran a 4.51, his 10-yard split was 1.60. So just 0.02 behind Anthony Hill. Like, his first step is excellent. I just love what I said. He flies around. He also had a 39-inch vertical jump. So this is a really explosive athlete with really good size, and he's strong too. Like, even if he's listed at 238, the same as Anthony Hill, he plays a lot stronger. And when he does take on blocks, he makes you pay for it. And it was really fun to see him out on the perimeter with like slot wide receivers and tight ends trying to block him. But there would be times where he would meet offensive linemen, and you could see that his play strength is there to do that. He's also a really good tackler. Good form, hits hard, wraps up. He missed just 9% of his tackles in 2025. That's a really good mark. Another area where he really shines is as a blitzer. So I mentioned the slot cornerback role. Another thing that he would do a lot of is playing a true edge role. He played about as many snaps on the ball as a true edge as he did as an inside linebacker. So he got some opportunities to actually like rush up the arc, and he would actually show off like really good bendiness as an athlete. He's got that ankle flexion that you would look for in like an edge rusher. So that's going to absolutely play as a blitzer, whether you're sending him off the edge or up the middle. Overall, there's just a lot of traits and fun tape that you kind of watch Jake Golday and kind of convince yourself like, yeah, I would bet on that guy. Like, I think this could probably work as more of an inside linebacker, but there have been players before that have tricked us like that. And there is a lot that he's going to have to prove in what he's going to be asked to do at the next level as an actual inside linebacker. And I do think that there's a lot of moments on tape that tell you, like, this is far from a proven thing that it's going to work. Like, I think when he gets into his zone drops, I don't think he's as active with his eyes and understands kind of route combinations and how defenses are trying to attack him. And even then, like, a lot of it is from the curl flat area, and like, it's just different than what he's going to be asked to do, covering the middle of the field with zone coverage assignments. So I think there's a long way to go with the zone IQ and using his eyes in his coverage drops. I also will say, while I praised his athleticism, he also is not like the craziest lateral athlete. I think he's less stiff than Anthony Hill, as we described, but still not amazing in terms of his ability to turn in space. The foot speed, it's a little bit slower. Like, it especially shows up as a slot defender when he's out there with wide receivers and thinner tight ends. Like, he's still a 6'4", 240-pound dude. Like, there's going to be some times where they, especially in that defense, put him in some compromising situations as an athlete. But I think that's going to be less of a concern sliding as more of an inside linebacker. I think he can move certainly well enough for that position. And then, even though I praised his ability to take on blocks, there were a lot of times, especially in those edge run defense duties that they would ask him to do, there was a lot of times where I felt like he could have made a much better effort to recognize the run and then in turn actually get off of blocks, because his highlight reel of like block shedding is really good. I know he has the physical ability to do it, but there was a lot of times where he's responsible for the edge and he would do enough to force the running back inside, which is technically the base point of his duties, is to be the force player. But a really good force player is going to force the back inside and then get off the block and make a play. So a lot of times in that role, he just didn't really make the effort to do that. So again, there's there's things to pick at with his game. It's not like he was perfect in that weird role that he played. And then again, you're really projecting him into a different role as an inside backer. So like I said, absolutely one of the biggest enigmas in this draft. Very fun player to watch. We'll see how it goes. Tough player to find a pro comp on. I just wrote down shades of Leo Chanel, who I loved coming out. I don't think he's as good of a prospect as Leo Chanel was, who I was like, I would take Leo Chanel at the end of the first round when he came out. We're about a round later on Jake Golday. You can definitely point to a lot of differences in the role that Golday played versus Chanel, but I do think just in terms of the athletic profile, there are shades of it. In terms of just a really big, fast guy that plays super physical and maybe isn't the most fluid guy in space. Again, tough guy to come up with a pro comp on. It's not perfect, but that's what I went with there. Okay, let's get into the top 4 here. Next up, I have CJ Allen out of Georgia. He's a bit of a unique player himself in that he's certainly not the biggest guy. He's just north of 6 feet tall, 231 pounds, 31.5-inch arms. So the size is like perfectly adequate is all I can really say there. He's not the fastest guy. There was reports that he ran a 4.47 yesterday. Look, I've seen that story before where out of nowhere, some source claims he ran a 4.47 somewhere. I will just say this, like, I'm willing to look at my eyes as someone that did 4 games on CJ Allen. He is not a 4.47 guy. Like, there's a lot of times where his speed stalls out towards the sideline, even against like quarterbacks. And, you know, I'm not talking about like Taylon Green, just like your average SEC quarterback would break angles and scramble against his spy coverage for first downs or running backs to the sideline. Like if we got a legitimate official 40 time from him, I figured it would probably be about 4.62, 4.65. Like he's not super fast. He's fast enough, but I just want to get out ahead of that because I could see some comments saying like, dude, he ran a 4.47. I'm like, look, even if that is true, which I don't buy it, the tape doesn't tell you that at all. But it's fine. You don't need to be a burner to be a really good linebacker in the NFL. I do think he moves well. Like he's got a good first step. And I think his agility, change of direction, ability to kind of slide with the run, stay square as a tackler, it's certainly good enough for run defense duties at least. And despite his size, he is strong as an ox, man. I at first didn't really get it with CJ Allen, and I even tweeted about it. I was like, what's the like thing on CJ Allen? Like, what's the selling point with him? It took me a couple games to really see it because it plays with your eyes a little bit. He's a little bit of a smaller guy, but man, when linemen try to block him and when he arrives as a tackler, like his pound for pound play strength it's got to be the best in this draft, at this position at least. Like, dude, when he takes on blocks, the heavy hands just boom, like he'll knock back linemen. He can dispose of blocks. He has stopping power as a tackler. Like, that's his best trait. Now, there's still only 230 pounds of mass, so there's times where he can get drowned out against the run a little bit. But when he's able to take guys on with like when he's square and he's got the right technique and everything is right, so to speak, from a technique standpoint, there's really good play strength. So that's how I landed at a B for play strength with him, because the size still is going to play into that. But that trait right there, the pound for pound play strength, is really how he leverages the best part of his game, which is as a run defender. He is the highest graded run defender I have in this draft at the linebacker position. We talked about the ability to take on blocks, the tackling ability, and he's an extremely disciplined run defender. He has a very, very firm understanding of gap discipline. He's not going to allow cutbacks. He's going to play his assignment like Georgia coaches the run like really well, and it shows on his tape. And I think from a diagnostic standpoint, it can hurt him at times. He can be a little bit slower to like trigger and be confident and aggressive to get upfield, but he'll do it at times. And I think you can continue to work with him just as any of these linebackers. It's not like I was concerned about his diagnostics. It's just like, Can we speed it up even more and be a really special run defender? Now, with the praise I've given him as a run defender and him coming in as my LB4 and a second round grade, there's a but coming, and you can probably guess what that but is. And it's the coverage. I just did not like his coverage tape, man. I talked about his athleticism earlier being certainly good enough from a run defense angle. When he's getting into space and trying to cover, he's just fine as an athlete. Again, he's not that fast. He's got a good north and south first step, but the ability to kind of open up and cover range in space, the foot speed to match route breaks, when he is out there going against really good athletes, you can tell he's not special. He's just okay in that sense. And then, I just really don't think he knows what he's looking for in zone coverage yet. And I think you can fault Georgia's system big time for this. How often do we complain about how their system, especially their third down, rushing packages, it hurts so many of their players, pro projections. And it's not any different with CJ Allen. He's either dropping into a very shallow hook zone, or they're blitzing him. And I just don't know that they really coach these guys, the coverage side of things, well. And hopefully he can get up to speed on that stuff, right? Be better with his eyes, understand how things are developing behind him so he can take away digs and stuff that are developing behind him. Be a little bit more confident to take risks out in zone and take throwing windows away and jump stuff. There's just so much on his coverage tape where you could maybe squint and see a play here or a play there where he was doing some of that stuff you want to see. But for the vast majority of the time, it's he's getting manipulated out there by the passing offense. Just kind of, they know where he's going to be and they can scheme routes around him pretty damn easily. So there's a long way to go in that sense. And again, he's not that great of an athlete. He doesn't have these long arms to, get, to help reduce his margin for error and disrupt throwing windows and that kind of stuff too. So I don't know that he'll ever be a very good coverage player. You hope he can be at least a little bit better. But I will say this, I really like my pro comp on CJ Allen. It's Nick Bolton, who is not the biggest guy. He's not the best, rangiest coverage player, but he's developed a little bit in that sense. And he's a hell of a run defender for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he went in the second round. I think it's almost a parallel pro comp in terms of who the player is. But let's go to my number 3, in brackets, linebacker, Kyle Lewis out of Pittsburgh. Extremely different player, but a hell of a football player. The thing that goes around in draft Twitter is just draft good football players. I think Kyle Lewis absolutely falls into that category of just draft good football players. The reality of it with Kyle Lewis is you do need to be a system that has a place for him. A lot of these kind of Fangio style systems, or even a lot of the McDonald style systems that are kind of the meta around the NFL, for the most part, they're we have our 2 inside linebackers, and they're going to play between the tackles as inside linebackers, and that's where we keep them. I don't think Kyle Lewis is great for those systems. He's 5'11", 223 pounds, and he looks like a safety. He looks like a nickelback. He is very thin, and when he gets met in between the tackles, there's just only so much he can do, right? So it is draft good football players with Kyle Lewis, but you got to be a team that is able to align your fronts so that he's playing as maybe a base linebacker. I think the New York Jets, the Detroit Lions, the Kansas City Chiefs, teams that play a lot of base defense on early downs, and that rate is rising nowadays. There's teams that do it about 30-40%. We thought the true weak side linebacker was dying, but there are a few teams that will go out and run that. Or if you really want to just use him as that big nickel, big slot player, on earlier downs and kind of base your defense, almost use him like Nicky Manwari, like Kyle Hamilton, and just let him play out on the wing and just view him in that sense as not even really a linebacker. And then once you get to passing downs, you can stick Kyle Lewis in between the tackles. I think back to how the Browns used Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You can't square peg round hole Kyle Lewis or it's not going to work. So he's not going to be for everyone. But if you have the right system fit for him, oh man, Kyle Lewis is fun. He is so good. He is one of the most instinctive players in this draft at any position. The athleticism out in space. Anybody that's tracked these player rankings and my draft guide, like with all the different categories, you guys know I don't go giving those A+ grades very often. I don't like saying the word elite very often. I think it gets overused and should be used very selectively to truly capture what is rare, what is special, what might not come around until every 2 or 3 drafts or every couple years. Kyle Lewis has elite change of direction skills for this position. He turns his hips and can redirect and can bend around blockers better than I think a lot of like cornerbacks can. So that's a big reason why I think you can put him out as a nickel, like a big nickel base defender because of the way he moves in space. And it pairs with remarkable foot speed, the ability to match great athletes, match their footwork to dance around blocks. He's got an elite first step. His acceleration, his 10-yard split is one of the best in the class. And yeah, he happens to be really fast too. He ran a 4.53. I think he is fast, but I think when you watch him, it's more of like the fluid athlete. The quickness that he plays with is what stands out even more than his speed. But you pair that with a guy that just like, it's so clear that this guy studies tape, that he knows ball, that he is such a comfortable coverage defender and such a confident coverage defender. The way that he takes stuff away, the way he can carry receivers and tight ends in zone coverage and understand how teams are attacking him. He's one of the best curl flat defenders I've ever seen at any position, where he has just the ability to flip his hips, turn and get out from like condensed formations. He can bolt out towards the sideline, and he is so good at that balance from the curl flat to take underneath stuff away, but also recognize when stuff is developing behind him and kind of bait the quarterback at times into bad throws. Just extraordinary zone IQ, feel from zone coverage. The man-to-man stuff, if we're talking about him as a linebacker or a big safety, like all of his fluid athletic ability, the way he processes movements and responds to the information that his eyes are giving him, that makes him an excellent man coverage defender. The only knock there is like sometimes he's a little bit shorter than some of the guys he's going against and can't quite contest some of these targets, but he's going to stay sticky. He's an amazing blitzer with that bend we talked about. I mean, when they scream him off the edge, I mean, there was times when I'm watching Kyle Lewis, and I have, closet takes that sometimes I break them out 40 minutes into a video like this, and sometimes I just stash them. There was times watching Kyle Lewis, and I'm like, tell me why Kyle Lewis isn't a better edge player than David Bailey, because he's just as fast, and he can actually bend around the corner when you blitz him off the edge, because my take on David Bailey is, he doesn't do a whole lot else other than just running upfield and sacking the quarterback. Closet take, don't hold me to that. I'm not serious, but that's just like a thought I had watching Kyle Lewis's tape, because he is a challenge when they would scream him off the edge, where he can threaten the top of the arc and just bend back inside and get these sacks. And it's not just that, he actually has like a nasty spin move as well, which ties back to the David Bailey thing where his next move is a spin move. Anyway, we don't need to keep going down that path, but like, dude, as a blitzer, he's fantastic. And he's even got like really good eyes against play action. Like, again, this dude, like, he clearly watches tape. He understands, like, teams are going to run play action at me, and I can't be over aggressive. I gotta have that right discipline. It's impressive, man. Everything he does against the pass, he has a legitimate chance to be a just disruptive, dare I say, like superstar type of defensive player, the type of guy that impacts games and makes the type of highlights, frankly, that warrant like Pro Bowl votes and that type of stuff. Like, if used correctly and put in a position where he can use his tools, it's going to be really fun to watch. Now, as a run defender, there's just only so much he can do. Undoubtedly, he will get swallowed up against the run. And with his inability to truly take on blocks, he is one of these guys we've described where he absolutely is going to try to out-athlete potential blockers, especially between the tackles, where, like, okay, he's going to try to dance and use that bend and that agility to get around guards and tackles that are climbing up to him. And it does just lead to a pure boom or bust style, because he does have the rare traits to actually pull that off a decent amount of time. But sometimes all he's going to do is just take himself out of the play. And the back's just going to go in the other way that he tried to dance. So he's got his limitations there. And he also, too, like, he is super aggressive as a run defender. Most of the time, it's like, if I'm going to make a play against the run, it's because I guessed right, I shot a gap, and I made a play. That's going to lead to a lot of cutback lanes opening up, blown gaps, and big runs. So that's why, like, as a down-to-down between the tackles linebacker, I don't think you're going to get the best out of Kyle Lewis. I will give him credit when he takes on blocks in the alley outside against, you know, slot corners and tight ends. It's funny to see some certain guys try to block him because he is stronger than most slot wide receivers, and he's just more technically sound and quicker than most tight ends. So if you try to throw, like, you know, swing passes and screens and run outside when Kyle Lewis is playing from the nickel, good freaking luck, man. And that's why I want him out there on early downs as much as possible. So really fun football player. We'll see how it works out with his size. Again, you don't want to square peg round hole him as a scheme fit, but I see a ton of what Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was for the Browns, a team that did a really good job using him as a weak side linebacker as much as possible, getting him to play out on the wing, in between the tackles, more on passing downs. And then, yeah, if you got to play in between the tackles on earlier downs, he's going to be your attacking linebacker. And then you want to pair him as well with, you know, more of a gap sound, block shedding, disciplined, big body linebacker with that style. So you got to know what you're getting. You got to put him in the right fit. If you can do that, this guy could be an absolute difference maker. And he ended up with a top 50 grade for me. I really like Kyle Lewis. And now it's time to talk about Jacob Rodriguez, man. I feel like I've been hyping up Rodriguez since early February. I've been a huge fan of him throughout the process, and he's my LB2. He's consensus LB2 at this point, so it's not like this is some hot take at this point. But he's one of the most fun linebacker prospects I've watched since I've been doing this. Maybe not the highest upside or the most perfect linebacker, but sometimes you watch a guy and you recognize at a certain point that this guy's instincts and playmaking ability is game-changing and special. And that's really where it all starts with Jacob Rodriguez, something that isn't necessarily captured, like, I guess, by the grades on screen or the baseline evaluation of the guy. It's something that really grows on you as you watch his tape, and something you find yourself wanting to bet on. Now, I don't want that to sound like he isn't good at linebacker things, but I wouldn't say he's great at everything. He's not the biggest guy. He's 6'1", 233 pounds. He's not the fastest guy. He's got plenty of speed. When I first started hyping up Jacob Rodriguez, a lot of people were like, he's slow. And I'm like, he's not slow. He's probably going to run somewhere in the 4.5s. He ran 4.57. And I think that shows on tape. He's got plenty of speed, but he's not Sonny Styles. He's not Kyle Lewis, right? And I think in terms of burst and movement skills, very good. Like very, very fluid overall athlete. And in terms of play strength, very solid. So you're talking about a very balanced, good athlete, but at 6'1", 233 pounds, 31.25-inch arms with the athletic profile, it's like he's just good in the athletic measurables department. You talk about run defense. I think he's very good as a run defender, not foolproof or perfect or anything like that. Like he's a solid tackler, but does miss a decent amount of tackles, especially out in space. He kind of leaves his feet too much and can whiff a little bit more than you like to see. I think in terms of diagnostics and discipline, it's very workable, very good. I wouldn't say this is the smartest linebacker I've ever seen that's always, his first step is always in the right direction, or he never blows gap discipline or anything like that, but very solid. I think he's very solid at taking on blocks. I think he's physical. He's got good technique to do it. He can use those quick feet to get around blocks at times. You don't see him get caught up on blocks too much as a run defender, but you put the whole package together with the physical tools, and it's like, yeah, he's a really good high floor run defender. Maybe not the most physically imposing, dominant, like no-brainer first round linebacker as a run defender. You know what I'm saying? And then his coverage is honestly, I want to see his coverage get better. Like if we're being critical, I think his zone eyes, all of his good plays in zone coverage largely come in flashes right now on a play-to-play basis. It's a little bit more of a tricky conversation because he is extremely instinctive when there's an opportunity to jump a play and a quarterback is going to make a mistake. He is, I would say, about as good as any linebacker I've ever watched at making quarterbacks pay for their mistakes. So like when he's in the area, he can feel things out and go make a play. But on a down-to-down basis, is he always taking stuff away? Was he, locked down in coverage? Like, no, like teams were able to drop balls in behind him and around his coverage. He wasn't always there. As a man defender, he's just solid. He actually, honestly, like really takes the cheese against play action. Like they definitely can draw him in, drop balls over his head. That playmaking mentality, I think, is actually a weakness against play action. He's going to have to find a nice balance there. But I still think he's a solid coverage defender, and the fact that he's so instinctive when he's around the right area to react to the quarterback's eyes, like that's probably it. What you're seeing right there is he's very glued on the quarterback, and he kind of drops to his spot, and sometimes offenses are going to be able to manipulate him and know where he's going to be and complete passes into his coverage. But he's on, he's kind of telepathic with the quarterback and what he's thinking. And when the QB puts it in his area, he will go make a play. So he's good enough in coverage. Plus that, it's like, I still think he's very useful as a, coverage defender. So you put the whole package together and it's like everything, every box is kind of checked for the most part with some nitpicks that we talked about. It's like he's a very nice high floor linebacker that you're probably talking about in the second round. And that's, I think, why you see a decent amount of second round grades on Jacob Rodriguez, because if that's all you're talking about, that's who he is as a player. However, where I think the difference is, certainly for me and all of the other people that have kind of taken that leap with Jacob Rodriguez as a first round linebacker prospect, it's that you've got a high floor guy that also is incredible at getting the ball out. And if you're willing to gamble that this is a guy that's going to be able to force, maybe not 7 forced fumbles like he did in his last year at Texas Tech that made him someone that got like Heisman Trophy votes because of how many times he forced turnovers. But let's say he gets you 3 forced fumbles a year because he is someone that is acutely dialed in to opportunities to catch unsuspecting running backs, come in from odd angles or come in head on and hammer that thing out. It is a skill man. And it's not a skill that fits necessarily into my grading profile because it's so rare that you see a guy that is so uniquely good at that thing that it's not worth building in a draft category for it when it's, 1 out of 75 players that it's something you spend so much time talking about. But it's Darius Leonard all over again. And maybe this is me having learned through the Darius Leonard experience with Colts fans. I went back and forth with it with Colts fans for years. I was like, Darius Leonard's kind of overrated. He's not that great in coverage. He's not that great as a run defender. He's a pretty solid overall linebacker. But what happened with Darius Leonard is because he was so good at the peanut punch, and this was all before injuries kind of derailed his career. The kids probably don't even know who I'm talking about. He changed his name to Shaq Leonard. But year after year, he proved that the peanut punch plays in the NFL, and when you're that good at it, when you focus on it, those are season-altering, game-changing plays. If you are forcing 3 or 4 fumbles a year, and I think Jacob Rodriguez can do that on top of all of the other stuff, it is a little bit of a out there narrative and a leap of faith that you're taking with him, but when you see him do it with such good technique and do it so consistently, I think it's going to play in the league. And it'll be fun to track that. But I don't know that everybody realizes how valuable even a single forced fumble is. If you want to get real analytical about it and talk about wins above replacement and defensive players that add the most value to their teams and win expectancy and stuff, if you're forcing 3 fumbles in a season, that's going to shoot you up those charts extremely fast. So it's a trait of his that I am willing to bet on. And it's not the only thing I like about him, obviously, but it's a key part of his projection, and it all, the ability to force those fumbles packaged with the fact that he's instinctive and takes the ball away as a coverage defender too. It all plays into his instincts as well. And then you can talk about he can get better at some of this other stuff too, just as any young linebacker can. So really a big fan of Jacob Rodriguez. Unique prospect. I love the Darius Leonard comp, even if there's differences. I think Rodriguez is a better athlete than Leonard. Leonard was a little bit longer as a linebacker. But I do think in terms of being a guy that is at linebacker stuff is going to be pretty balanced. And then the instincts, the ability to have those game-changing plays, that's going to set him over the edge and make him potentially, like Darius Leonard was for a little while, considered one of the better linebackers in the NFL. But let's now go to Sonny Styles. And I have been kind of dubbed the Sonny Styles hater in this draft process because I feel like I'm at an island as one of the only players that pushes back on me being comfortable with Sonny Styles as a top 5 draft pick. And because of that, I have talked about this in all of my mock drafts. I've talked about it all the time. And look, let's begin with the elephant in the room. Sonny Styles is an awesome linebacker prospect. He's my LB1. I'm still comfortable with him inside, maybe the top 8 to 15 picks in this draft. And his upside with his athletic profile is stupid. He is the highest potential grade that I have given to any player in this draft class, 97. And I fully understand why people get excited about the theoretical best case scenario of Sonny Styles to be one of the best players in the NFL. And I understand different levels of risk tolerance and the desire to pursue that upside. But just to address the specific stance that I have on him, where I'm a little bit hesitant with him as a top 5 pick, if that's where you're going to go with Sonny Styles, there's really 2 things. First of which is just my perspective on this position that we're talking about. It's one of the least paid positions in the league for a reason, because it's really hard to consistently change games from this position group. It's part of the reason I like Rodriguez so much, because what he does can consistently change games if he's able to force those turnovers. But there's really only one linebacker in the NFL today that week in, week out is an absolute nightmare for offensive coordinators where they have to game plan around that guy. They have to worry about him like changing the outcomes of games with his instincts and the way he blows plays up and can take the ball away. And that's Fred Warner. After Fred Warner, there's like a 2-tier drop in terms of like who the best linebackers in the NFL are. Look, like Jordan Brooks, really good player. Zach Bond, really good player, had one season where he maybe played at a Fred Warner type of level and then came back to earth the next year. Jack Campbell, really good player, but for the most part, these aren't guys that offenses are like sweating the idea that they have to go against those linebackers, right? In the way that you often will with a defensive lineman, or the way that a lockdown corner can change your game plan, or even like a, high impact safety that is just a complete nuisance on the wing. What I'm getting at here, and I know some people are like, dude, just shut up and talk about Sonny Styles, but I think this is part of the fascinating conversation with him, because he is quite possibly the most hyped up prospect in this entire draft class. But he has to be Fred Warner, which is on the page here. The high-end best case scenario is he is Fred Warner. I acknowledge that if the mental side of things gets there, it will be worth taking him inside the top 10. However, we've done this before. Maybe not quite to this degree, because his height, weight, athletic profile is with the gods among men. I mean, what he did at the Combine, I am speechless, right? And that's why the hype is what it is. But he's not the first, like, uber athletic, big, fast linebacker that gets drafted in the first round, really largely off of the athletic profile. Tremaine Edmunds, great example of a player that was in a better draft class, but I think if Tremaine Edmunds, if they swapped shoes, I think we're talking about very similar types of prospects. Probably Styles a little bit better than Tremaine Edmunds, but not by too much. Tremaine Edmunds, 6'5", 4.5 speed, like the Brian Urlacher comps were all over the place with Tremaine Edmunds. And it turns out he's not Brian Urlacher. He's Tremaine Edmunds. Devin White was the 4th pick in the draft. Jamin Davis, 1st-round pick out of Kentucky. Crazy athletic profile that isn't that far off of Sonny Styles. Quay Walker, misevaluated as such, but viewed as a similar idea. You could even point to like an Isaiah Simmons as a 6'4", crazy speed safety that converted to linebacker. I think Styles is better than Isaiah Simmons, but go back and look at what people said about Isaiah Simmons. He's too athletic to fail. Now, I think Sonny Styles' agility and change of direction shatters Isaiah Simmons from a movement skills perspective, but you get the point. The amount of failures of this guy is so athletic at linebacker. Just imagine if he reaches his upside, what he's going to do. Number one, I don't know that what he's going to do is necessarily as impactful on the game as you think it is. And number two, history has told us that this position group has the highest bust rate, or at least highest disappointment rate of any position group in the NFL draft. And that is because this is probably the hardest position to play in the NFL, where you have to break down all of this pre-snap motion, deal with play action. One play, it's heavy personnel. The next, you're covering a wide receiver. You're dealing with these ridiculous athletes on the offensive line that you have to face in the NFL. I, at this point, do firmly believe that linebacker is the hardest position to play in the NFL. And do I watch Sonny Styles and say, this dude's tape is so unbelievably good that he's going to step in the league and be amazing right away? I just don't, you guys. It is maybe what you expect, where it is in flashes, really exciting. But if you want to start with the run defense, there's a lot of plays on Ohio State's tape where you just don't feel Sonny Styles' presence. And a lot of that is because his run diagnostics, as he's young at this position, they're not there yet. There's a lot of plays. Watch the first half against Michigan. Up and down his tape throughout the year, where he's not seeing the run on time, he's late to see it, and he doesn't quite scrape over the top. Like, you want a 6'5", 245-pound freak athlete, if he's on the backside of a run, to get over the top and cut off these runs. there's a lot of times where he doesn't do it. And another thing he does that I've talked about with him is he's got to get better at his block take-on ability. He is extremely, and it's like eye-opening when you go tape to tape with him, he is way too eager to just launch himself into incoming blockers. And I think there's a balance with it because there's times where that strategy is smart. Ben Solak had a really good discussion with Sonny Styles about blowing up a gap where the run was developing behind the lineman. And he's like, all I've got to do is kind of make the tackle with my blocker's butt, basically. Like blow up the gap, force the back to stop, and that muddies up the play. There's certainly times where he should do that, but there's a lot of plays on tape where Styles kind of has that mentality of he's like, I don't really need to make the play myself. I just need to detonate this block, and, Caleb Downs is going to clean it up for us. Or Arvell Reese flying around next to me. And you will see, like, there are times where the run is coming his way, and he'll just launch himself, like, shoulder first into the blocker. And it's like, dude, like, a lot of these linebackers we talked about on this list are going to stick their hands out, square up, and get ready to make a play in the gap. And I think it really shows up on Sonny Styles as a blitzer as well. He's so fast and can blow up running backs, but there's times where he just like leaves his feet and launches himself into the running back, and the running back gets up. He's like, great, I did my job. Like, you didn't sack the quarterback. There's so much more to be unlocked with him as a blitzer. So look, those were the weaknesses I saw with Sonny Styles on tape, specifically in run defense. That's all stuff that, like, we gotta keep working at this stuff, right? Like, if you're gonna be frickin' Fred Warner, you know what makes Fred Warner is this. And for the audio listeners, I'm pointing to my brain. Look, Fred Warner's a 4'6", 40 guy. He's a really fluid athlete. He's got the length, but plays about 235 pounds. Yes, Fred Warner is a really good athlete. It's not the fact that he's, a god at the combine, why he is 2 tiers above every other linebacker in the NFL. And again, Sonny Styles has to be Fred Warner if he's going to be worth a top 5 pick. Now, if you get Tremaine Edmonds with the 12th pick in the draft, that's fine, right? This is all in... It's all in context, right? And I'm not trying to be overly negative on Sonny Styles. My number 1 linebacker. The dude's a freak. Like, he could be insane, right? It's just, anybody that's followed the draft knows how much hype this guy has. And there's no room on that train. I'll say that. So that's why my tone is what it is. I do want to talk about his coverage a little bit. It's very good. I mean, man-to-man, very special. The athleticism alone, like, he's going to be able to delete tight ends, cover slot wide receivers, like, you name it. Like, man coverage is probably the best thing he's going to do out the gate. But there's not a ton of times where linebackers are in a true man-to-man situation. I will say this, his zone coverage has room to grow. I would say it's comparable to Jacob Rodriguez in the sense that there are a lot of plays where he is really good with his eyes. He is active to take stuff away. He understands how routes are developing behind him. And then there's a lot of plays where he is just kind of hanging out, staring at the QB, waiting for something to happen, and not being that proactive zone defender to go and take stuff away or feel stuff and naturally take stuff away. It's all stuff that I do think will get there. But again, if you just, we already know he's a great athlete, right? If you just take a second to, I don't want to say ignore the combine, but put it on the side for a second and just watch the tape, you can get Sonny Styles in both phases. You can run the ball against him. You can throw the ball against him in zone coverage. He's not perfect yet. There's a lot of unbelievable moments with him when you see, like, when he recognizes it and he knows what he's got to do, the way he can move and the range he has with those long arms and the frame, special stuff. Can you get that consistently? You're going to need to if you're going to spend a top 5 pick on Sonny Styles. So that's all a, highly contextualized conversation about one of the best prospects in this draft, but plays a position that is lowly valued and has a tremendously high first-round bust rate because of how hard it is to play. So there is the thorough conversation on Sonny Styles. We've got the full Sonny Styles take in one place now. I'm glad we had it. I think it's going to be a really fun kind of draft take of mine and narrative to follow. And in no way am I saying I think Sonny Styles is going to be a bust. It's more of just, could this be a player we look back on and say Giants take him at number 5, which I don't know that they'll do that or not because they literally do have Tremaine Edmonds on their roster. But could he be a player that we look back on and be like, he's a pretty good player. That team probably would have been better off going in a different direction in the draft if he does go with the top 5 or 6 picks. You know, maybe Dallas trades a bunch of picks up to get to number 6 and they take Sonny Styles, you know, that kind of deal. Like if Dallas gives up pick 12 and pick 20 to go get him at number 6, like I'm going to be pretty harsh on that. Like I don't think that's worth it. If he falls to you at 12, great, you know, love that for you. So anyway, let's be on our way. We are going to do safeties next. I will for sure get that video done. Tight ends, I'm hoping to get something out there. I don't know that it'll be a top 10 necessarily, but I still have a lot of tight ends to watch before we get to the draft. I can say pretty confidently that I'm not going to have a video on quarterbacks. I did the Mendoza breakdown. I've tweeted a lot about Ty Simpson and talked a lot about Ty Simpson in mock drafts. So I feel like my Ty Simpson opinion is pretty well covered at this point. And then this draft falls off like a freaking cliff after that. So if you want my quarterback thoughts, I am going to have to just default to my draft guide or join me for the live stream, because as those guys start going, I will be giving my opinions on all of these picks on draft day. But for now, that is all we have. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Let me know what you thought of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. This was a fun one. And I will see you guys actually Saturday at noon Eastern. I'm doing my final what I would do 2-round mock draft. So you can set your reminders to be here, not just for the draft stream next Thursday, but Saturday as well for a fun mock draft show. But obviously, lots of stuff to work on here in the coming weeks. I appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.